Good morning. My name is Jasmine. I want to welcome you to Sanctuary Church's online service. We're so excited to have you this morning. If you want to just say hi, let us know where you're from in the comments below. Before we get started, I'd just like to pray for us. Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for this outlet that you have for us to worship together and to have service even though we can't gather together. Father, we just ask that you would open our hearts to receive the message that you have for us this morning. We just lift Pastor Scott and the worship team up to you, Lord, as they just serve you and serve your people. We just pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. Without further ado, here's the worship team.
Have you ever seen the wonder in the glimmer of first sight, as the eyes begin to open and the blindness meets the light? If your heart so say, I see the world in light, I see the world in wonder, I see the world in light, bursting in living color. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. Have you ever seen the wonder in the air of second life? Having come out of the water with the old one left behind. If your house so say, I see the world in light, I see the world in wonder, I see the world in light, bursting in living color. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. I see the world in grace, I see the world in gospel, I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. I'm walking in the wonder. You're the wonder in the world, turning wilderness to wonder. If your heart so say, I see the world in love, I see the world in freedom, I see the Jesus way. You're the wonder in the world. I see the world your way, and I'm not afraid to follow. I see the world your way, and I'm not ashamed to say so. I see the Jesus way, and I'm walking in the light. I see the world in light, I see the world in wonder, I see the world in light, bursting in living color. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. And so I'll say, I see the world in grace, I see the world in gospel, I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. Yeah, I'm walking in the wonder. You're the wonder in the world, turning wilderness to wonder. And so I'll say, I see the world in love, I see the world in freedom, I see the Jesus way. You're the wonder in the world. just gone through the motions. I'm sorry when I just sing another song. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. Oh, I'm sorry when I've come with my agenda. I'm sorry when I forgot that you're enough. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. I'm caught up in your presence. I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave. I'm not here for blessing. Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you. I'm sorry, and I've just gone through the motions. I'm sorry, and I just sang another song. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. I'm sorry when I've come with my agenda. I'm sorry when I forgot that you're enough. Take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. I'm caught up in your presence. Oh, I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave. And I'm not here for blessings. Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you. I just want you and nothing else, nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you and nothing else, nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you and nothing else, nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you, nothing else, nothing else, nothing else will do. I'm caught up in your presence. I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy here for blessings. Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you. I just want you. Let's sing this together, worthy of every song. Worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Jesus. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Sing holy. Holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your love and lead me in your love to those around me. Worthy, worthy of every song we could ever sing. Worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. Oh, we live for you. Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. We live for you. And holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder.
thank you again for worshiping together with us. We just appreciate the opportunity we have to gather in this forum. And we've just been singing about building our life on Jesus. This week in my devotions, I've been going through the book of Luke, and in Luke chapter 12, Jesus talks about having a rich relationship with God, a rich relationship with Him. And that's my desire for myself, and that song expresses that we would just have our lives built upon Jesus. And it would be our hope and our desire that as we spend these several weeks in the Gospel of Mark, looking at Mark's account of Jesus and responding to the invitation of Jesus to follow Him, that we would fall more in love with Him. Our understanding of Him, how good He is, His love for us, His kindness, His power would just be increased. And so that wherever we are in our relationship with Him would just be increased, so that we would all be able to say we have that rich relationship with Jesus. I want to pray, and then we're going to jump back into Mark as we pick up on the first miracle that Mark tells us about Jesus performing. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the Gospel of Mark. Thank you for Mark, who gives us this account of Jesus. Thank you for Jesus's incredible invitation to all of us to follow Him, and that whether they were the curious bystander way in the distance, occasionally glancing His way, or whether we're so close behind Him that, as the rabbis would say, that the dust of our rabbi covers us, wherever we are in this journey, that we would just follow Jesus, become more like Jesus, learn more about Jesus' love for us, and then be able to share that love with others. So help us as we spend these minutes together in your word. Amen. Well, we've covered this ground before, but right at the beginning of the Gospel of Mark, Mark starts out his book and he says, hey, I want to tell you some really good news about Jesus, the Son of God. He's God, and He came to be our liberator. He came to set us free, that everything that would try to suppress and oppress us, that He would come and liberate us from. Today we're going to be looking at the first miracle that Jesus performs, that Mark tells us about, and it begins to reveal more and more about Jesus' love for us and care for us. Now, I need to tell you right at the front, we're going to cover a lot of scriptures today. So if you can, get a notepad, get a pen, get a pencil, get something on your electronic device that you can kind of write these things down, because we're going to cover a lot of different scriptures, and it's going to be a little more heady than normal, but we just really wanted to try to provide a bit of a context for this incident we're going to look at in Jesus' life, because it helps us understand more clearly what is going on and better understand Jesus and what His desire is to do in our life. And as we look at this issue, which we'll get there in just a minute, it may seem even a little strange at first. You may wonder, where are we going with this? This seems a little bit out there, but I want to ask you, just hang in there. Let's stick around to the end. We'll get there. We'll land this, and we'll all, I think, have a greater confidence in the love of Jesus for us, His liberating power to set us free, an understanding of our world and how it functions all around us, and even just a greater empathy for people around us as we look at this passage. So it may seem like a tall order, so buckle up and let's get started. Mark chapter 1, verses 21 to 27. This is the first miracle that Mark tells us about Jesus performing. Jesus and His companions went to the town of Capernaum. When the Sabbath day came, He went into the synagogue and began to teach. The people were amazed at His teaching, for He taught with real authority, quite unlike the teachers of religious law. Suddenly, a man in the synagogue who was possessed by an evil spirit cried out, "Why are you interfering with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know you are the Holy One of God." But Jesus reprimanded him. "Be quiet. Come out of this man," He ordered. At that, the evil spirit screamed, threw the man into a convulsion, and then came out of him. Amazement gripped the audience. Yeah, no kidding. And they began to discuss what had happened. "What sort of new teaching is this?" they asked excitedly. "It has such authority. Even evil spirits obey His orders." As Jesus has this interaction with this man in the synagogue as they're gathered there, the response, we're told, was that the crowd was amazed. Now, just imagine with me for a moment, if you were in a meeting and someone stood up and interrupted what was taking place and began to be disruptive and calling all this attention to themselves, you would probably be amazed too. It kind of amazed and perturbed, like, what is going on? Why is he doing this? She doing that? Isn't someone going to stop this? Or if we saw someone who was being affected by evil spirits, we would probably be amazed, a little intrigued, a little freaked out, a little like, what in the world is going on? But the amazement of this crowd wasn't because there was a person who was being affected by evil spirits. It wasn't because there was a demonized person. This was a common thing in Jesus' day. In fact, in the Gospel of Mark, Mark gives us 4 different accounts of Jesus interacting with people who were demonized, who were being affected or influenced by evil spirits. In Mark chapter 5, there's a man who was so affected by evil spirits that they couldn't constrain him, even with chains and whatnot. And so he spent his life living in the cemetery, and Jesus came and in a moment set him free. In Mark chapter 9, there's a story of a father who has a young boy who's been affected by these evil spirits, and they would occasionally grab him and he'd have these seizure-like experiences, and these spirits would try to throw him into the water or the fire to take his life. And again, Jesus shows up and uses his authority and sees these people liberated from the oppressive influence of these evil spirits. So it was common in Jesus' day to see people demonized, if you will. So that wasn't what amazed the crowd. What amazed them was Jesus' authority over these evil spirits, that Jesus was able to deal with them in just this straightforward, come out, and they came out. See, in Jesus' time, they were familiar with this. In fact, they attributed a lot of the maladies and the sicknesses that people had at that time to some kind of evil spirits in their life, that maybe that's why they were blind, that's why they were deaf, that's why they were mute, that's why they behaved the way they did. It wasn't always the reason why, but they kind of attributed a lot of what went on in people's life to the influence of these oppressive evil spirits, these powers. And exorcism would have been fairly common, or at least attempts at exorcism, as people would have tried to see these individuals liberated from that. But when Jesus did it, he simply commanded it and it happened. There wasn't long prayers. There wasn't long wailing. There wasn't any aids or any kind of apparatuses to help him in that. See, at that time, when different people would try to perform exorcism, some of the things that they would do in that day is they would burn the heart and liver of fish. I don't know what effect that would have, or if it would have any effect, but they recognized the influence of these evil spirits on people, and so they were just trying what they could to see them liberated. They would also burn roots from certain plants in that hopes that the smoke would somehow lull the evil spirit to sleep, or cause them, you kind of, when you're sitting around a campfire and smoke is going in your eyes, you move, you get out from where you are. And so somehow this smoke from the plant would either lull the spirit to sleep or say, you know what, there's smoke in my eyes, I'm going to go see somebody else and leave. So they would try these different things. They had different kind of like talismans or amulets or these long prayers. And sometimes it works and sometimes it didn't. And so the influence of evil spirits was common in Jesus' day in people's lives. The attempt to see people liberated from these evil spirits was common in Jesus' day. What was uncommon and caused the amazement of this crowd was the authority that Jesus had over these spirits to command them to leave, so this man would be liberated and free from these powers seeking to oppress him. When these evil spirits cried out from this man, they knew who Jesus was. They said, "We know who you are. You're the Holy One of God." And they asked these questions to Jesus. Why are you interfering with us? Are you here trying to destroy us? So let me ask you to consider for just a moment, who's us? Who is the us that they are referring to? Who would you attribute us to? We live in the 21st century where technological advancement just is faster and faster and faster. We are educated people. We firmly believe in science. Science is our friend. So can this really be real? Who is this us? Maybe it's just a mental health issue. Maybe it's just an outburst. Maybe we can attribute it to some other issue that was going on. I mean, isn't the devil that little red guy with the pointy tail, the hooves, and the pitchfork more Halloween than real life? Can we really believe in this? One of my favorite movies is The Usual Suspects. Now, I'm not in any way recommending it. You watch it at your own peril. I'm just telling you, I really like it. It's this group of criminals, these usual suspects, who get rounded up by the police, and while they're rounded up, they plot this crime. And in the story, there's this mythical crime lord, Kaiser Soze. He's just he's talked about, people are afraid of him, but you never really know if he's real or not. And one of these usual suspects, as he is being interrogated about the reality of Kaiser Soze, he makes this statement: "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist." And sometimes as we would look at this account in Jesus' life in Mark chapter 1 and read about this incident at this synagogue that day, and these man who all of a sudden had this outburst, who are you to say this to us? Are you trying to destroy us? We might kind of wonder, that it's got to be some other explanation. Well, based on what we'll look at in the next couple minutes, and for me personally, just based on my own personal experience, who is us are the evil spirits in our world that are seeking to influence us in ways contrary to God's purposes. At one point in my life, I may have had a little bit more theoretical, okay, it's kind of out there, but it's not. But I've had not a lot of experience. I've had a couple of experiences, but one, as I was getting ready for this, that just came to the forefront of my mind. I was in a room when a very small, elderly woman who was getting some prayer ministry, all of a sudden, her countenance changed, her voice changed, and this small, elderly woman tossed a much younger, muscular man across the room. And we're like, what in the world is going on? And this superhuman strength that she seemed to exhibit in just a moment was restrained simply at the name of Jesus. And so I think, okay, so there is an us. There is a very real us. There are very real forces that want to suppress our lives, to oppress our lives, to steal, kill, and destroy, as Jesus tells us in John 10:10. And when we think of being antagonized or oppressed and things that would kind of come against us, we might be tempted to look at other people. Well, he is against me. She is against me. They are against me. We might be tempted to look at some of the systems in our world, systemic racism, systemic injustice, and some of these systems in our world. But Paul tells us in Ephesians where our attention, when we try to consider who is us, really should be directed. Paul tells us this in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. He says this: "For our struggle against all that would seek to oppress and suppress us, for our struggle is not against enemies of blood and flesh, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." Paul mentions kind of different categories of beings. I don't know the levels, but he mentions rulers, he mentions authorities, he mentions cosmic powers and spiritual forces of evil. He's letting us know that there are very real spiritual forces actively at work in our world, working contrary to God's purposes for us, for those around us, for the world. And there's some form of hierarchy in these powers, and that God's created this. Paul tells us in Colossians chapter 1, verse 16, that all these spiritual powers, all these hierarchies, all these beings were created by God. He says this in Colossians 1:16, "For through him," speaking of Jesus, "God created everything in the heavenly realms and on earth. He made the things we can see and the things we can't see, such as thrones, kingdoms, rulers, and authorities in the unseen world. Everything was created through him and for him." So all of these spiritual forces, whatever their labels would be, whatever their hierarchies be, whatever their rankings would be, were all created by God, and were all created for God. We see that God made all these spiritual beings, and he entrusted them with authority over large portions of creation. And they were intended to help God govern different aspects of our world and move things towards his purposes in our lives. But in the same way that when God created us and gave us authority over the earth and the animal kingdom, and we were invited to cooperate with him in bringing his purposes forth in our world, but because he's a God of love and love must be a choice, he gave us free will, and we willingly chose to rebel and go against him, and this is the world we live in. Those spiritual agents that God created and gave them authority over large regions and entrusted them with care of different aspects of our world, they were also given free will, and at some point in history chose to rebel. And their rebellion led to a civil war in heaven that resulted in 1/3 of them being cast out from heaven down to earth. Side note, whenever we begin to talk about these evil spiritual forces, they don't live in hell. They reside here on earth, cast from heaven down to earth, and now they're doing what they're doing in a manner contrary to God's purposes. And so now these spiritual beings, these evil spirits, they use the authority and the influence that they were given by God when he created them on the people and systems of our world in direct opposition to God's purposes. Again, hang tough. We're going to get to where are we going with this? What does it all mean? We'll get there. Here's 3 passages of scripture that tell us about this civil war that took place in heaven, this rebellion. The first is in Isaiah chapter 14, and it's talking about Satan, Lucifer, the prince of the air, and it tells about this. It says, "How you are fallen from heaven, O shining star, son of the morning. You have been thrown down to earth, you who destroy the nations of the world. For you said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven and set my throne above God's stars. I will preside on the mountain of the gods far away in the north. I will climb to the highest heavens and be like the Most High." So we kind of get to see behind the curtain, if you will, and see the wizard. And we see this incident that took place sometime back in history when this being that God created, Satan, was in heaven, and he was perfect. He was beautiful. He was amazing. And he was just adorned in beauty. And he chose to say, I want to be just like God. I want to occupy the place of God. And he began to have these internal desires for more than what he had. And God says in this passage, because of that, I've cast you down from heaven to earth. Ezekiel 28, verses 13 to 16, in reference to the same thing going on. We're just kind of trying to lay a bit of a groundwork here. You were the model of perfection, full of wisdom and exquisite in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. I adorned you and anointed you as the mighty angelic guardian. You had access to the holy mountain of God and walked among the stones of fire. You were blameless in all you did from the day you were created until the day evil was found in you. Again, created with free will and chose that free will to turn against God. Your rich commerce led you to violence and you sinned. So I banished you in disgrace from the mountain of God. I expelled you, Almighty guardian. Even as God's word tells us about this, he says, he tells us about the beauty, the perfection that he was created, that he chose to, and he sinned and there was evil in him. And so God cast him out, but God still says, but you still are a mighty guardian. There was very real authority and influence I entrusted to you, and I freely gave that to you, and you're freely choosing it to use it in a way contrary to my purposes, but you still have it. Then jumping way back to the end of the Bible, the book of the Bible, in Revelation chapter 12 tells us again about something that happened years and years and years ago in the past. It says this, then there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and his angels. And the dragon, talking about Satan, lost the battle, and he and his angels were forced out of heaven. This great dragon, the ancient serpent, called the devil or Satan, the one deceiving the whole world, was thrown down to the earth with all his angels. And verse 4, just before this, tells us this, that 1/3 of the angels were swept away with him. And it says this, his tail, again, talking about the dragon, swept away 1/3 of the stars in the sky, and he threw them to the earth. So, God created all these spiritual beings. Colossians 1:16 tells us that. He entrusted them with authority, with influence, with care over different aspects and regions of our world, the systems, the regions, and people of our world. And he gave them free will. And they freely chose to rebel against God. And there was this civil war in heaven where the enemy, Satan, said, I want to be like God. And he led this rebellion. And there was this battle going on up there where an end result was Satan and 1/3 of the angels. I don't know how many angels were created, but 1/3 got cast to earth. 2/3 remain in heaven with God. And so now that 1/3 reside here on planet Earth, and they use the authority, the influence, the power that they were given, again, in ways to try to thwart God's purposes. So again, all this goes back to this incident in Mark chapter 1. Who is us? We're describing, hopefully laying a context for this is us. There's an example in the Old Testament of the realms, the different realms of authority that these beings have. In Daniel chapter 10, again, we get another glimpse into the fact that some of these evil spirits had influence and authority over large geographic regions, not just people, but over regions and governmental systems. In Daniel chapter 10, Daniel in the lion's den and all of that, and he's now a governor in Babylon. He's been praying and he's just seeking God. And he has this instance where this angelic being shows up and says this to Daniel in Daniel chapter 10. Then he, this angelic being that showed up to visit David, said, don't be afraid, Daniel. Since the first day you began to pray for understanding and to humble yourself before your God, your request has been heard in heaven. I have come in answer to your prayer. Now, this next couple of verses just kind of like, wow, there's a lot more going on than we actually see. But for 21 days, the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia blocked my way. Then Michael, one of the archangels, came to help me, and I left him there with the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia. So this angel says, you started praying, and God sent me with the answer. But I got waylaid, and for 21 days there's been this cosmic battle that you're not able to see going on, and I couldn't get away from it until Michael, this archangel, he came and kind of tagged out, and he's now battling it out. So let me to come now, give you the answer. So here it is, and now I've got to go back and tag Michael out so that we can deal with this. It's amazing. This is stuff that you think would be in a fiction novel or some sci-fi, movie, but this is the reality of the world we live in. And this is all part of who us is referring to by that individual in Mark chapter 1. And then in verse 20, the same passage says, soon I must return to fight against the spirit prince of the kingdom of Persia. And after that, the spirit prince of the kingdom of Greece will come. So you see these different spirits, these different powers, had very real authority. These verses let us know that they had very real authority, very real power and influence over regions and governmental systems in our world. And they've influenced the systems of our world. When we talk about the systems of our world being broken or not working well, or there's systemic this and systemic that, there is, because the systems of our world have been under the influence of these evil spirits. And so there's lots of bright lights. You can look over there and see some goodness and some goodness and some goodness. This shouldn't be this pessimistic, fatalistic perspective of our world. But the governments of our world, the systems of our world are all under the oppressive influence of these powers, trying to thwart God's purposes. And if that wasn't enough to kind of open our eyes to what's going on, Jesus actually affirms that this is all true. Jesus kind of says, yes, this is the way the world currently works. In Luke chapter 4, when Jesus is led out into the wilderness by the Holy Spirit, and he's tempted by the devil shows up to him and begins to tempt him when he's weak, and the devil says to Jesus that he, the devil, would give Jesus all the authority and all the power over all the kingdoms of this world if Jesus would just simply worship the devil. And Jesus never refuted that claim. The devil said, they're mine to give. And Jesus never said, no, they're not. Jesus simply said, the Bible says you should only worship God and not worship anyone else. And he refuted that claim. But Jesus in that affirmed it. Yeah, they really are. They're under your influence. Multiple times throughout the Gospels, Jesus refers to Satan as the ruler of this world. And Paul affirms this too when he talks about Satan as the god of this age and that the whole earth lies under the power of the evil one. In Matthew chapter 13, Jesus is telling a parable about our life on earth and what the kingdom is like and heaven is like. He's illustrating life, and he talks about a farmer who went out and planted seed, and there was good things that would be growing. There was fruitful things that would be growing. There was things that would contribute to life and beautify life that were growing. But he went out in the morning and he saw amongst all the good things that had been planted that at night an enemy had come and planted weeds. And so in and amongst all the goodness of our world in this parable, there was bad things, weeds that were growing up and weeds that were choking out the life of some of these other things. And they're kind of wondering who did this. And Jesus in the parable says an enemy has done this. So we are alerted to the fact that our world is filled with goodness. There are seeds of God's word that are blooming and bringing life and goodness all over the place. But at the same time, there are weeds that are trying to choke that out. And they're not there, but God didn't do it. God didn't send a virus. God didn't send a storm. God didn't send a disease. That's not God. We simply live in a world where people, all of nature, and all of the systems of our world are under the oppressive influence of these powers that are working contrary to God's influence. This is the reality we live in. And there is an enemy intent on thwarting God's good purposes for your life. There is an enemy intent on thwarting God's good purposes for my life. And this influence isn't just against me or against you or against her or against him. It's against the very systems of our world. It's against all of nature. It's against everything. Our world is permeated with this influence of these oppressive powers. That's why in 1 Peter we are warned to be alert. Don't be lulled into complacency. Don't fall for the trick that the devil pulled where he convinced you to say, you know what, he's not even real. If he was real, it's a fairy tale or it's a Halloween costume. No, 1 Peter 5:8 says this, stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. In Ephesians 4, we're shown that there are actions that we can take that would give these evil agents actual footholds into our lives, where our lives would come under the greater influence and a higher degree of oppression from these powers intent on our destruction. But this is the whole point of the passage. And here we're going to kind of land this kind of thing. Where have we been going? This is where we've been working to get to. See, the whole point of this passage in Mark, why Mark records this as the very first miracle, because remember, Mark starts out his book and he says, I have some really good news for you. I want to tell you about Jesus. He's the Son of God. He's God himself, and he came to liberate us. And the very first example of this power that Jesus has as our liberator, Mark shows us, is Jesus' power over the powers, over all the oppressive powers that would seek to thwart God's purposes in our lives, seek to steal, kill, and destroy, seek to rob us of who God created us to be. Mark shows us right at the top, Jesus has authority over these powers. He is greater than these powers, and he has come to liberate us, and not only us, but all the earth and the systems of our world. Paul tells us this in Ephesians chapter 1, verses 19 to 21. I pray that you will understand the incredible greatness of God's power for us who believe in him. This is the same mighty power that raised Christ from the dead and seated him in the place of honor at God's right hand in the heavenly realms. Now catch this. Now he is far above any ruler or authority or power or leader or anything else, not only in this world, but also in the world to come. This is the really good news that Mark is alluding to and paints these pictures of these different events in Jesus' life to lead us there. As Jesus says, follow me. Jesus is our liberator. He has power over the powers. And Jesus invites us not only to experience his liberating power in our lives, but to join him, to partner with him, to cooperate with him in seeing this liberation come to more and more of our world. That's what the prayer, when Jesus says, pray this way, may it be on earth as it is in heaven, that's what that prayer encompasses. That earth, which is currently under the influence of these powers, would be liberated the same way heaven is liberated, that there would be freedom, that those things which oppress would be thrown off, that those things which suppress would be thrown off, so that we could live, so that our world could live, so that all of nature could live in the freedom that God intended it. And that changes everything. Because that all of a sudden, now we look, why is nature behave that way? Why do viruses behave that way? Why do governments behave that way? Why do the systems of our world behave that way? Well, this isn't to take responsibility away from the people, the choices that we'll make, but it's to give us some understanding that our entire world is under the influence of these oppressive powers, but Jesus, who is greater than them, came to set us free. So here's some questions to consider as we land this and to leave you with. Here we go. The first one. How can Paul's words that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces, help us have empathy towards others and help us in resolving conflict? When we know that, okay, this person or these people, this system, that's not my real battle. My struggle is not really with them. There's interactions we're having, there's discussions we're having, but the real struggle's not here. There's something outside here that is having its influence on that. So just that we would take a couple minutes and consider, how can that enlarge our empathy for people, regardless of what their actions may be? And how can that give us a greater help in resolving conflict we may have? Second question is, as we begin to realize that all of nature, that all the systems of our world and that people are under the influence of these powers, how does that shape our worldview? How does that help us respond more like Jesus to the situations we face? We're, whatever we are, month 10, year 1 in the middle of a pandemic. Some people said right off the bat, oh, God is angry, God is judging us. Nothing could be further from the truth. Our world is under the influence, and but that may be how some people respond. If they don't have a proper understanding, they just think someone got angry, someone did something wrong, and this happened, or it's just kind of natural causes. Well, they're really not true. There's our world, the viruses, nature, the systems of our world are under the influence of these things. And so we still have to, wear the mask, isolate, do all those things, but it helps us have a better understanding. God is not out to get us, and actually God is greater than and above these. And so in the midst of them, we can journey through that with a sense of peace, optimism, and expectancy, because we know that there is a liberating force at work in the midst of the oppression of these powers. Last question, and then we'll wrap up. How can we individually partner with Jesus in seeing these oppressive powers thrown off of our lives and those around us? See, we're all under the influence of these powers. And there's an ongoing liberation or deliverance that we're all experiencing. I've had different points in my life where I've had to have deliverance ministry. I wasn't some other strange voice or anything other weird, but I just knew that, the oppressive powers of this world had a foothold or a grip in some areas of my life. And I had to pray and in Jesus' name have people help me and walk with me so that I could be liberated from some of those oppressive powers. There's a way I can partner with Jesus and cooperate with him in seeing that happening in my life. There's nothing shameful about that. There's nothing condemning or judgmental about that. That's just the reality of the world we live in and the powers around us. But not only seeing ourselves free, seeing those around us set free, seeing whatever would oppress and suppress them so that they would know the liberty and love of Jesus. So anyways, those are 3 questions. We'll chat about them afterwards and they'll be on the screen for you to look at. But I encourage you, just take a few minutes and reflect upon how we can partner with Jesus in his liberating work. And I want to close in prayer and then we're going to worship again. Let's pray. Father, thank you for Jesus, who is above all the powers. Thank you that you came to set us free. You came to set nature free. You came to set the systems of this world free. And Lord, we are moving forward in that all the time. And we do pray, as you instructed us to pray, that it would be here in our lives, that it would be in Chilliwack, that it would be in whatever city we reside in as we're hearing this, as it is in heaven, that the liberating work of Jesus would be advanced. We pray this in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. Hey, thank you again for joining us. We look forward to spending these next several weeks responding to Jesus' invitation to follow him. Let's take a couple more minutes and worship together. Take care. God bless.
Have you ever seen the wonder in the glimmer of first sight? As the eyes begin to open and the blindness meets the light. If your head so say, I see the world in light, I see the world in wonder, I see the world in light, bursting in living color. I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. Have you ever seen the wonder in the air, a second light, having come out of the waters with the old one left behind? If your head so say, I see the world in grace, I see the world in gospel, I see the world your way, and I'm walking in the light. I'm walking in the wonder. You're the wonder in the wild, turning wilderness to wonder. Your help so say, I see the world in love, I see the world in freedom, I see the Jesus way. You're the wonder in the wild.
Hey, I'm Jasmine,
And I'm Ryan.
and the two of us just wanted to go over some of the questions from the service. These are really thought-provoking questions.
Yeah, they're not surface level at all. They're really deep.
Yeah, so we're really excited for you guys to get into them and talk about them amongst yourselves, even to just process them on your own, because these are just good things to really be meditating on. The question that I wanted to go over was just about how our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers of this world, and how it's not against people. And I think that so often we can make little issues just kind of about other people where we can point our fingers. I don't know if you guys have ever seen The Hunger Games, but there's a scene in one of them where Katniss Everdeen, the main character, is going to like shoot somebody that's on her team, and she forgets who the real enemy is, and the person looks at her and says, recognize who your enemy is, Katniss. And I just feel like that line has really stuck with me, and just seeing day to day just what we're going through. Like there is a heavenly realm that we don't necessarily see the way we do this one, and to be aware of that and how that's operating, I just think is so important, because I think that is what gives us empathy towards other people, is to recognize, okay, this person has been through things and I don't understand them, but there is another power at work here that might be having an influence on how they're how they're responding to me, and they're not my enemy. That's my brother, that's my sister, that's my family, and I just love them no matter what. And I think that totally changes how you treat people, to recognize that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. A question that stuck out to me was when we realize that all of nature, the systems in our world, and the people under the influence of these powers, how does that shape our worldview? How do we step into Jesus, into God, into the light, when all of these forces are against us? All of these forces are trying to pull us down, bring us down. How do we step up into the light? It might be just a simple conversation with a neighbor. It might just be, coming up to somebody that looks down and just putting a smile on their face.
Yeah.
All these things that I can take into my life and use as steps, to build empathy towards others when we have these pressures and these spirits kind of pushing us down.
Yeah, I like that. That's so simple, like a smile. You never realize how far that's going to go. It's just
Totally.
that little bit of give. So we really hope that you guys are challenged by these questions this week. We'll see you next week. Have a nice week.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.